It's incredible how far we've come in just 1 year. In fact, in just the last 6 months. Last year, at this time, the cruise industry was still in the recovery stage. This year, we're seeing record levels of cruise passengers. What a comeback story for Port Canaveral and the cruise industry.
When Omicron spiked in late December, the CDC issued warnings to avoid cruise travel.
This trip coming just a few days after the CDC released new guidance saying all travelers, even vaccinated, should avoid cruising amid the spread of the Omicron variant.
The agency is advising people to avoid cruises regardless of vaccination status.
A few months later, the CDC removed guidelines for cruise lines, saying the industry, quote, has the tools they need to prevent and mitigate the spread of COVID-19, end quote. Throughout the pandemic, we collaborated closely with our cruise partners to chart a course that would restore cruising to pre-pandemic levels or more. This summer, the pent-up demand for travel was evident as cruise travelers returned to cruising in full force, averaging over 100,000 passengers a week.
All of our planning and hard work with our cruise partners has brought us to this point. The other 3 segments of our business, cargo, real estate, recreation, have been strong all year.
$116 million in revenue and counting. And next month, the world's biggest cruise ship will home port here, Royal Caribbean's Wonder of the Seas.
After difficult times during the pandemic and the shutdown of the global cruise industry, Port Canaveral leadership recently approved its biggest budget ever.
The port's new fiscal year started on October 1st, and the CEO is projecting another record year of revenue.
This year, the port CFO says they have seen 3.7 million multi-day cruise passengers. But even with their success on the cruise ships, they hope to expand even more.
Cargo operations at Port Canaveral continued to build in fiscal year 2022. We worked closely with our cargo partners to accommodate increased demand for products, resulting in making this the best cargo year for the port, with record volumes of lumber, petroleum products, aggregates, fertilizers, juice concentrate, space components, and other commodities. The diverse cargo at Port Canaveral requires us to maximize berth capacity by expanding existing infrastructure. With shovels in hand, officials from the Canaveral Port Authority joined with leaders from federal, state, and municipal governments, along with business and representatives of the space industry, to break ground on a massive $48 million project to rebuild Port Canaveral's North Cargo Berth 3, with a project completion date of April 2023.
I was eager to support our port's Infrastructure Development Program grant application to acquire the funding to rehabilitate and expand NCB3.
Port Canaveral's foreign trade zone expanded this year with the addition of Raider Outboards Incorporated, a Titusville-based company that manufactures specialized outboard motors for the U.S. military. And Melbourne Orlando International Airport came aboard as well as a new FTZ operator for the receipt, storage, and distribution of jet fuel for international flights operating from the airport. Governor Ron DeSantis promoted Florida ports to help alleviate national supply chain disruptions.
So we're able to accommodate these ships without backups. Our seaports are used to operating around the clock. They're used to moving cargo.
In April, plywood delayed by port congestion at another port was delivered to Port Canaveral. In September, the first of many shipments of frozen vegetables, French fries, and canned vegetables arrived, part of a regular service to supply a major national retailer. Over 30,000 metric tons of granite ballast rock used in the construction, the Brightline Railway construction connecting Orlando International Airport to Miami, were discharged at Port Canaveral South Cargo Piers 3 and 4. The operation took almost 40 hours to remove over 66 million pounds of rock from the ship, which will be used in the construction of the rail beds. The space program has had a record number of launches this past year, with even more planned for the future. Throughout the year, Port Canaveral has continued to support our space partners with berth space for their marine operations and use of our mobile harbor crane. As a result of the record number of launches, Port Canaveral partnered with the U.S. Coast Guard for a ports and waterways safety assessment to ensure mariners' access to the port remains a priority. Plans by the Brevard Zoo to build an aquarium and conservation campus at Port Canaveral took another step forward as zoo officials continue to develop new concepts with the goal of construction beginning in 2024 and a planned opening in 2027. In December, visitors to Port Canaveral did a double take with the arrival of the new Staten Island Ferry, constructed in Florida and destined for New York City. And in May, Cunard Cruise Line's Queen Elizabeth sailed from Southampton, England to Spain and stopped at Port Canaveral for a royal port of call visit. In mid-September, Florida Lieutenant Governor Jeanette Nunez visited Port Canaveral for a rolling briefing tour of our port on a particularly busy day for cargo, cruise, and commercial space operations. The Lieutenant Governor was given an up-close look at our facilities and waterfront from all aspects of the port. She met with our port tenants and cargo customers, getting a full appreciation for how Port Canaveral is a significant economic driver for the Central Florida region and our state overall. Our recreation facilities continued to welcome high numbers of visitors. This past year, we introduced a new online reservation system for Jetty Park Campground. Commercial fishing is an important component of the port's mission, but this past year has not been without its challenges for this valuable industry. Shrimping began the year in good shape, but increased foreign imports and rising fuel prices have impacted the local harvest of white, red, and brown shrimp, as well as hoppers and rock shrimp. As for fishing, the year overall saw good demand for above-average catch volumes, but with lower than normal quantities of popular fish like kingfish and grouper. More ships, bigger ships is the theme of this past year, as our cruise partners brought some of the world's largest, newest, and most sophisticated cruise ships home to Port Canaveral. In June, the Norwegian Prima was floated out from her dry docks in Venice, Italy, the first of 6 in a class of new builds for Norwegian Cruise Line. The Prima will make Port Canaveral her home in December. Also in June, Port Canaveral welcomed home Disney Cruise Line's newest ship, the Disney Wish, as she arrived in the U.S. for the very first time. She was greeted with a big Disney party and christening ceremony featuring all of the Disney characters. The new ship, powered by LNG, liquefied natural gas, is the second LNG-powered cruise ship to call Port Canaveral home at America's first LNG cruise port. Norwegian Cruise Line deployed the Norwegian Getaway to Port Canaveral, offering 5 to 10 night sailings to the Eastern and Western Caribbean and the Bahamas. We also welcomed the Norwegian Joy in August as our new port of call ship. She made several visits to Port Canaveral on her way to the Bahamas and the Caribbean. In early November, we welcomed Royal Caribbean's Jewel of the Seas. This Radiance-class ship is the 4th ship to home port at Port Canaveral. And we welcomed home the largest ship in the world, Royal Caribbean's Wonder of the Seas, as Port Canaveral's newest home-ported cruise ship with sailings to the Eastern Caribbean and Royal Caribbean's private island in the Bahamas.
Thanks to our people and partnerships, there's no doubt the opportunities for our port continue to grow. It's full speed ahead with even more possibilities on the horizon.